She was returned for being too difficult. Vampire King sneered, "She won't be difficult for long." The night sky over Nocturne's citadel was heavy with clouds, a thick velvet darkness pierced only by the cold silver of the moon. The castle rose like a dark crown atop the cliffs, its towers jagged and sharp, reaching toward the heavens with quiet menace. Below, the village whispered tales of the vampire king who ruled there, a man of terrifying beauty and unmatched cruelty. Few dared to look at the citadel without shivering, for it was a place where shadows moved on their own and secrets lingered in every stone. Tonight, the gates opened once more. A carriage, its wheels echoing like distant thunder on the cobblestones, approached the main entrance. Inside, a young woman sat rigid, her hands clutching the edge of her seat as if holding herself together by sheer will. Her hair, black as a raven's wing, fell over her shoulders, slightly tangled from the road. Her eyes, emerald green, burned with a fire that refused to be tamed. Her name was Seraphina. She had been sent back, not as a guest, not as an honored visitor, but as one who had failed the expectations of the vampire court. They called her difficult, a trait that had seemed dangerous in the eyes of those who sought control. But Seraphina did not care for their labels. Her spirit had never bent for anyone, and she did not intend to start now. The carriage door opened with a soft creak. Two silent guards stepped forward, their pale faces hidden beneath dark hoods. Seraphina hesitated before stepping onto the stone pathway, the cold night air biting at her skin. The castle loomed above her, shadows twisting along its walls like living creatures. "Seraphina," one guard said, his voice low and reverent. "The king awaits." "I am here," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The guards led her through long corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, lined with flickering torches that threw dancing shadows against the cold stone walls. Portraits of ancestors watched silently, their eyes seeming to follow every step. Seraphina's heart remained stubbornly defiant. She had faced danger before, but nothing like this. The air itself felt alive, thick with magic and unspoken warnings. Finally, she was brought to the great hall. The doors were massive, carved with symbols that hummed faintly with power. Beyond them, the darkness seemed absolute, but it was a darkness that pulsed, as if waiting for her arrival. When the doors swung open, she saw him. Kael, the Vampire King, sat upon a throne carved from black stone, his presence commanding even without movement. His hair was the color of midnight, his eyes like liquid gold that pierced through the shadows and straight into her. He did not rise. He did not greet. He merely looked, and the air seemed to thicken around her, as though the walls themselves recognized the tension between them. Kael's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "So," he said softly, his voice smooth and rich, "they have returned you." "Too difficult, they claim." Seraphina did not bow. She met his gaze steadily. "I am not here to please anyone," she said. A flicker of amusement crossed Kael's face. "No," he murmured. "I can see that, and I find it intriguing." The hall was silent, except for the soft drip of water from some unseen source. Servants and guards watched nervously from the shadows, but neither Kael nor Seraphina paid them any mind. There was a strange electricity between them, a tension that seemed to hum through the stone itself. "You may think yourself clever," Kael continued, "but this is not a place for games. You are in my world now." "I am aware," Seraphina replied. Her words were calm, but every syllable was a small act of defiance. "I do not intend to play anyone's game but my own." Kael leaned forward slightly, resting his chin on his hand. His golden eyes studied her as though measuring her very soul. "Bold," he said finally, "and foolish. There is a line between courage and recklessness. I wonder which you will cross first." Seraphina's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from something else, something she did not fully understand. There was power in this man, yes, but there was also loneliness, a weight hidden beneath his dominance, a sorrow in his perfect control. And for reasons she could not explain, she felt drawn to it. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft clinking of armor from the guards. Then Cale spoke again, his voice a velvet whisper that carried through the hall. "I have seen many who were difficult. Most do not last the night. You, however, I am curious how long your spirit will hold." Serafina met his gaze, unwavering, long enough to survive your attention. For a moment, the corner of Cale's lips twitched, almost a smile. Then he straightened, his regal composure returning. "We shall see," he said. "We shall see." The guards motioned for her to follow him deeper into the castle. Serafina's mind raced as she walked beside Kyle. Every step took her further into a world she had only heard of in whispers, a place of shadows, ancient power, and secrets buried in the stone and blood of the citadel. They passed through corridors lined with towering windows that looked out over cliffs and forests, the moonlight casting everything in shades of silver and black. Serafina's eyes caught glimpses of strange statues, frozen in poses of suffering or ecstasy, and tapestries that depicted battles she did not understand. Magic hung in the air like mist, subtle yet undeniable. Finally, they reached a private chamber, a room grander than any she had ever seen. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, and the ceiling seemed to stretch infinitely upward, painted with constellations that shone with an ethereal light. A fire burned in the hearth, casting warm golden hues against the cold darkness beyond. Kyle gestured for her to sit. "Rest," he said softly. But there was an undercurrent in his tone, something unreadable. Serafina hesitated. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. Yet she could not ignore the pull she felt, the subtle command of his presence, the way the shadows themselves seemed to bend toward him. Slowly, she sank into a chair, keeping her eyes on him all the while. For a while, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with the weight of unspoken words and the crackling of the fire. Then Cale moved closer, his golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You are unlike any who have come before me," he said, almost to himself. "Most are either afraid or obedient."
You challenge me."
Serafina lifted her chin, her voice quiet but firm. "I do not challenge for the sake of challenge. I only refuse to be controlled." Then he leaned back, a slow, deliberate movement, and spoke with a voice that was calm, yet dangerous. "Control is not always what you think it is. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is survival." Serafina's eyes narrowed. Survival at the cost of freedom is no survival at all. For the first time, a shadow of respect crossed Cale's face. "Perhaps," he murmured, "or perhaps it is simply the way the world is, until someone strong enough comes along to change it." The room fell silent again. Serafina could feel the weight of his gaze on her, a mixture of scrutiny, curiosity, and something she could not name. She knew she had to be careful. Yet part of her ached to understand the man behind the mask, the king behind the legend. Outside, the wind whispered against the stone, carrying with it secrets and omens, but inside, the chamber felt like a world apart, a fragile, dangerous world where power and desire met in equal measure. Cale finally stood, his movements fluid and precise, a predator in perfect control of his domain.
"You will find life here complicated,"
he said. "But you will also find that you are not as alone as you think." Serafina's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the strange tension that had begun to coil between them. She did not fully understand it, and perhaps she never would. But she knew one thing with certainty. The next moments, the next days, would test her in ways she had never imagined. Kale's golden eyes locked onto hers, unblinking and intense. "You will not be difficult for long," he said, his voice low and commanding. "And whether you like it or not, your fate is now tied to mine." The words hung in the air like a spell, and Serafina felt a chill run down her spine. She wanted to protest, to assert her independence, yet something deeper inside her stirred. A spark of curiosity, a flicker of connection, a warning, and an invitation all at once. As the firelight flickered against the walls, shadows moved with a life of their own, whispering secrets that only the night could know. Outside the window, the clouds shifted, revealing the moon in all its silver brilliance, as if the world itself was watching the two of them, waiting to see how this dance of defiance and desire would unfold. Serafina closed her eyes for a brief moment, drawing in a steadying breath. She knew her life had changed forever. She had entered a world of shadows, of power, of danger, but also of possibility. And in the distance, a voice lingered in her mind, soft yet commanding. "You will not be difficult for long, but neither will you escape me." And with that, the night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the story to begin. The first light of dawn barely touched the towers of Nocturne Citadel. The moon still lingered, pale and watchful, as if reluctant to leave the kingdom in darkness. Within the castle, Serafina awoke in the grand chamber Kale had assigned to her. The fire from the previous night had died down to glowing embers, casting faint orange light across the intricate carvings of the walls. Serafina sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers brushing over the cold silk sheets. Her mind replayed Kale's words, the way his golden eyes had held hers, unblinking, as if he could see into her very soul. She had been warned by the villagers about the Vampire King's charm, his power, his ability to break even the strongest will. But the truth was far more dangerous than the stories. Not yet. Not yet. Instead, he had tested her with his presence, a slow, deliberate pull that unsettled her and awakened something she did not yet understand. A knock at the door drew her attention. She rose cautiously, every muscle alert. A young servant stepped in, bowing low. "Breakfast is ready, Lady Serafina," the servant said softly. "The king awaits in the council chamber if you are willing to join him." Breakfast is pro-great, nodded, adjusting her cloak. "Thank you." The corridors of the citadel seemed even more immense in daylight, though the light never truly penetrated the castle's high walls. Shadows lingered in every corner, moving subtly as if alive. Serafina's eyes darted from one darkened archway to the next, alert to every movement. Guards followed silently behind her, their presence a constant reminder that she was not yet free. When she entered the council chamber, Kale was already there, standing before a massive map spread across an obsidian table. The room smelled faintly of incense and old stone, a scent that spoke of centuries of power. His golden eyes lifted, and a small, almost imperceptible smile appeared. "You are awake early," he said. "Curiosity, perhaps, or impatience?" "Both," Serafina replied. "And perhaps a little caution. This place is unlike any I have seen." Kayal's gaze swept over her, and for a moment he allowed a flicker of amusement to show. "Indeed, few have walked these halls and returned unchanged. Curiosity will serve you well, if you are careful." He gestured toward the map. "There are matters that require your attention."
Serafina leaned forward, her green eyes scanning the intricate markings.
The map depicted lands she had never known, forests blackened by curses, rivers that glowed with strange light, mountains scarred by ancient battles. Lines of ink shimmered faintly, as if alive, moving subtly when she looked away and back again. "The borders of the kingdom are unstable," Kale explained. Rival lords conspire against me. The citadel is protected by wards and walls, but even I cannot predict every threat. You may have a role to play, if you choose it. Seraphina's brow furrowed. I am not a fighter. I cannot wield your power. Kyle's eyes softened slightly, a rare vulnerability slipping through his controlled exterior. Strength is not always measured in battle. Intelligence, courage, and willpower. These are weapons in themselves. I can teach you to survive here, but only if you are willing to learn. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy cloak. She had entered this world unwillingly, yet the pull of it, the sense that she could shape it and herself, was irresistible. For days, she wandered the citadel under Kale's watchful eye. He allowed her freedom within its walls, though always within his gaze. Seraphina explored hidden libraries filled with ancient tomes and scrolls, learning secrets of magic, history, and the curses that lingered in the land. She found a garden tucked between towers, filled with flowers that bloomed in moonlight, and fountains that whispered softly in languages she could not understand. Kale often appeared in these moments, silent as a shadow, watching her. He did not intrude, yet his presence was undeniable, a quiet pressure that made her pulse quicken. She would turn, expecting him to speak, but he only observed, as if measuring not her actions, but her heart. One evening, as the moon rose high and the clouds parted to reveal a silver glow, Kale approached her in the garden. The air was cool, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers. Seraphina held a small book in her hands, studying a passage on protective wards. "You read too much," Kale said softly, stepping closer. His golden eyes reflected the moonlight, making him seem both more beautiful and more dangerous than ever. "I read what I must," she replied, not looking up. "If I am to survive here, I must know the rules." "And yet, you break them willingly," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You walk freely through places where others would never dare. You speak boldly to me. You challenge me." Seraphina finally lifted her eyes to meet his. "Because I must. If I bend to fear or obedience, I lose myself, and I will not lose myself, not to anyone." Kyle studied her in silence, a storm of conflicting emotions flickering across his face.
Respect, curiosity, desire, and something darker, loneliness, sorrow, and regret.
"Most would never speak to me so," he said at last. "Few would dare." "I am not most," Seraphina replied. The tension between them was palpable, a thread of energy that seemed to hum in the night air. Neither spoke for a long moment, each lost in their own thoughts, each measuring the other. Finally, Kale turned away, his cloak flowing behind him like liquid night. "There are dangers ahead," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Enemies who would take this kingdom, and perhaps even you, if I am not vigilant." Seraphina felt the shiver run through her. She had not considered herself prey before, but in Kale's world, the line between survival and death was thinner than a spider's web. Days passed, and their interactions continued to deepen in complexity. Kale would appear silently at her side, offering guidance, observing her, sometimes challenging her with cryptic words. He tested her patience, her courage, and her wit. She found herself drawn to him despite herself, frustrated by the pull of his presence even as she resisted it. One night, she discovered a hidden mirror in the library. The surface shimmered, reflecting not her own face, but visions of the past, fragments of Kale's life, moments of loss, betrayal, and heartbreak. She saw the faces of people he had once loved, all gone, all lost to time and treachery. A pang of empathy touched her heart, and for the first time, she understood the loneliness that shadowed his power. Kyle appeared behind her, silent as always. "You look into my past," he said softly, "and yet you do not recoil. Most would be frightened." "You are different?" I see more than power, she said quietly.
I see what you have endured. You are not just a king.
You are human, in your own way. His gaze lingered on her, golden eyes unreadable. Humanity is fragile, he murmured. And yet, it is what I find most dangerous in you. Your strength, your defiance, your heart, they are all dangerous. She met his gaze steadily. And yet you do not stop me. No, he replied.
I do not, because perhaps I wish to see how far you will go.
The tension between them grew with each day. Small touches, her hand brushing against a book he held, his cloak drifting near her shoulder, sent shivers through her. Words unspoken lingered between them, a dance of shadows and desire, curiosity and restraint. Neither fully admitted the pull they felt, yet both were aware of it, a silent current guiding their every interaction. One evening, a warning came. A distant tremor shook the castle walls, faint but undeniable. Cale's expression darkened.
They are coming, he said grimly. Enemies from beyond the northern mountains.
Seeking the citadel. You must be ready. Seraphina's pulse quickened, not with fear alone, but with the realization that danger was closer than she had imagined.
I will do what I can, she said.
Cale's eyes softened briefly, a fleeting warmth that startled her. Do not underestimate yourself, he said. You are stronger than you know, and perhaps stronger than I realized when I first saw you. For the first time, Seraphina allowed herself to hope. Hope that she could survive this place. Hope that she could understand Cale, even if she did not yet fully trust him. Hope that she could find a place for herself in this shadowed world without losing who she was. But as the moon climbed high and the wind whispered through the citadel, a shadow stirred in the corridors. Something ancient, something hungry, something that had waited for the perfect moment. And as Seraphina and Cale stood in the garden watching the stars, neither could know that the night would soon erupt with danger that would test not just their strength, but their hearts. The sound came first, a soft, almost inaudible rustle of movement, followed by a whisper of wings. Cale's eyes narrowed, and he moved to position himself between Seraphina and the unseen threat. His golden gaze scanned the darkness, calculating, precise. Seraphina's heart pounded, but she did not step back. She had come too far, learned too much to be cowed by shadows. And yet, the air seemed charged with a warning, as if the very stones of the citadel were speaking. Cale's voice was low, almost a growl. They are closer than I thought. Stay behind me. But Seraphina shook her head.
I am not behind anyone. I stand with you.
For a moment, time seemed to stretch. The night held its breath. And then, a figure emerged from the shadows. Silent, fast, dangerous. Cale's hand went to the hilt of his sword, and Seraphina felt the pulse of power radiate from him, a warning to any who dared approach. And in that instant, as the enemy closed in, Seraphina realized something she had not yet admitted. She did not just fear for herself, she feared for him. And that fear carried with it a strange, exhilarating thrill. Cale's golden eyes met hers, sharp and commanding. Hold steady, he said. The night is not yet over, and neither are we. The shadow moved closer, and the danger became real. Seraphina's heart raced as the first attack fell, swift and silent. A test, a warning, a beginning. She knew without doubt that her life in the citadel had changed forever, and that the dance between her and the Vampire King, between defiance and desire, was only beginning. The storm had come without warning. Thunder rolled across the cliffs surrounding Nocturne Citadel, and lightning illuminated the jagged towers, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls. Rain fell in sheets, hammering against the windows and doors like the drumbeat of some ancient warning. Inside, the castle was alive with tension. Guards moved swiftly through the halls, their armor clinking in nervous rhythm. Spells of protection shimmered along doorways and windows, casting faint glows in the dim light. Yet even these wards seemed fragile against the darkness pressing against the castle, a darkness that had been gathering for months, now ready to strike. Seraphina stood in the great hall, her cloak soaked, hair plastered to her face, but her eyes sharp and alert. Kale appeared beside her, calm despite the chaos, his golden eyes glinting in the flickering torchlight. He had been wounded earlier that night, a slash across his shoulder, yet he moved with the same perfect grace that always unnerved her. "They are stronger than I expected," Kale said quietly, his voice steady. "And cleverer. This is no mere attack. It is a test of everything we have built here." Seraphina tightened her grip on the hilt of a ceremonial dagger, its edge enchanted to strike through shadows.
"Then we will pass it," she said firmly.
"I will not let them break us." Bayalga's gaze softened, briefly revealing a flicker of vulnerability beneath his usual control. "I do not doubt your courage," he murmured. "But courage alone may not be enough. You must trust yourself and me." Trust was a word Seraphina struggled to understand in this place. She had come to the Citadel as a captive, a pawn in a game of power she had never asked to play. And yet, standing beside KL, she felt a strange magnetic pull, a sense that their fates were intertwined, whether she liked it or not. The first shadow moved like a whisper across the floor, silent, fluid, and deadly. Kale's sword was out in a heartbeat, cutting through the air with a force that made the walls tremble. Seraphina acted without thinking, stepping forward and casting a ward from the scroll she had studied. The shadows hissed and recoiled, but there were too many of them. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. "But
Together! Together! Focus on the source!" She met his eyes and nodded, heart hammering. They moved in sync, instinctively, a dance born of danger and necessity. Kael struck with precision, cutting down shadows that lunged from the walls, while Seraphina reinforced wards and countered their attacks with newfound skill. The citadel seemed to pulse around them, alive and responsive to their determination. Despite the danger, a strange exhilaration coursed through Seraphina. The fear that had haunted her since her arrival in the Citadel had not vanished, but it had changed. Now it was tempered with clarity and purpose. She was not just surviving. She was shaping the fight, standing beside the Vampire King as his equal in courage, if not in power. The shadows shrieked as they converged toward the heart of the hall, revealing their true form, creatures of dark magic, twisted by ancient curses, their bodies flickering like smoke and flame. One lunged toward Seraphina, fast as thought. She barely managed to deflect it with a ward stumbling backward. Kale was at her side in an instant, catching her arm and pulling her clear. His golden eyes locked onto hers, intense and unyielding. "Do not falter," he commanded. "You are stronger than they believe. Do you understand?" "I understand," she whispered, her voice trembling with exertion. And something deeper, something she could not name. The fight continued, each moment stretching into eternity. Kale and Seraphina moved as if guided by a single will, anticipating each other's actions. He protected her when needed, but he also allowed her space to act, to prove herself. Every strike she made, every spell she cast, deepened the unspoken bond between them. A connection forged in fire, fear, and mutual respect. Finally, the shadows recoiled, hissing and wailing as Kale struck a decisive blow, shattering the source of their magic, a dark crystal pulsating with cursed energy. The hall was silent except for the sound of rain against the roof and their ragged breaths. Seraphina sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. "We did it," she said, her voice hoarse.
Kale approached her, his golden eyes scanning her for injuries.
You fought well, he said softly.
Better than I could have expected.
She looked up at him, chest heaving, hair plastered to her face, and felt a surge of something she had not dared to feel before. Gratitude, yes, but also something more complicated. Something like longing. You saved me, she said quietly, almost ashamed of the admission. Kale's gaze softened, the dangerous edge of his presence momentarily replaced with tenderness.
And you saved me, he replied.
Do you understand? You are not just a visitor here, Seraphina. You are part of this world. No. Part of me. Her heart skipped a beat. She had resisted him, feared him, even defied him. But in this moment she realized the truth she could no longer deny. She did not want to resist. She wanted to understand him, to stand beside him, to share in the danger and the power and the strange, unspoken intimacy that had grown between them. Kale extended a hand, and she took it without hesitation. His touch was firm, commanding, but there was warmth beneath it, a rare human element that made her chest tighten. Do you feel it? He asked softly. The bond between us? It is stronger than either of us imagined. And yet, it is only beginning. She nodded, unable to speak, her eyes locked on his. The storm outside continued to rage, but within the hall, there was a moment of fragile calm, a fleeting connection in the midst of chaos. But the peace was short-lived. From the shadows near the far wall, a new presence stirred. A whisper of movement, a chill that ran deeper than the storm. Kale stiffened instantly, his body tense, every sense alert.
They are not finished,
he said, his voice low and dangerous.
Another wave is coming, and this time it will not be so easily defeated.
Seraphina's pulse quickened. She had faced danger before, but the way Kale spoke sent a shiver through her. The threat was real, immediate, and deadly.
Then we face it together, she said, her voice firm, though her heart raced.
Kale's golden eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed a hint of vulnerability to show. Together, he echoed. The hours that followed were a blur of movement and magic. Shadows surged through the halls again, faster and more cunning this time. Kale fought with precision, his movements almost a dance, while Seraphina used every bit of knowledge and skill she had learned to counter the attacks. They moved as one, instinctively anticipating each other's actions, a bond forged in fire and blood. At one point, a shadow lunged at Kale from behind. Seraphina reacted instantly, casting a ward that sent it crashing against the wall. Kale turned, his eyes meeting hers, and for a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The shadows, the rain, the storm outside. You are remarkable, he said softly, his voice filled with awe, and something deeper, more personal. I am only doing what must be done, she replied, her voice trembling.
Perhaps, he said, but few could face what you have tonight and remain standing. Fewer still, with their heart intact.
Her heart faltered at his words. She wanted to speak, to deny the growing feelings she could not name, but the next wave of shadows cut through the hall, and she had no time for words. Kale moved forward, his sword striking with lethal grace, and she followed, casting spells and wards that sent the dark creatures reeling. Finally, the last shadow fell, dissipating into nothingness as the cursed magic was destroyed. The hall was silent again, broken only by their breathing and the sound of rain dripping from the ceiling. Kyle turned to Seraphina, his golden eyes searching hers.
You have proven yourself, he said, more than I could have imagined.
But know this, the danger is not gone. The curse that haunts this kingdom still stirs, and soon it will demand more than we have yet given. Serafina nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "Then we will face it," she said firmly. "Together." Kael's gaze softened, and for a moment, the fierce, commanding king seemed almost human, almost vulnerable. "Together," he echoed. But as the storm raged outside and the shadows receded into the corners of the citadel, a new threat began to stir, one more dangerous than any they had faced. A dark voice whispered through the halls, a warning carried on the wind, a promise of trials to come. And in that moment, Serafina realized the truth she could no longer deny. She was no longer merely a visitor in Kael's world. She was bound to it, bound to him, and bound to the fate of a kingdom teetering on the edge of darkness. The night was far from over. The first light of dawn struggled to pierce the heavy clouds above Nocturne's citadel, and the storm had left a heavy, tense silence in its wake. The castle walls were streaked with rain and shadow, as if the night itself had left its mark. But there was no rest, not yet. A presence darker than any storm had arrived. One that even Kael had felt stirring for centuries, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Serafina stood at the edge of the highest tower, wind whipping her hair around her face, her cloak flaring behind her. Below, the courtyard and the halls of the citadel stretched like a chessboard of shadows and danger. She could feel it, the curse that had haunted this kingdom for generations, now awakened fully. It was cold, like a void, and it reached for everything living within its range, seeking to twist, consume, and dominate. Kael approached her silently, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. He moved with the grace of a predator, yet there was something different in his steps today, something urgent, protective, almost human. He stopped beside her, his hand brushing against hers. She did not pull away. "This is it," he said softly, his voice carrying over the wind. "The curse has awakened."
If we do not act, it will destroy the citadel, and perhaps even the kingdom beyond.
Serafina drew a steadying breath, her fingers tightening around the small ward she carried, a magical relic she had discovered in the citadel's library. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with determination. Kael's eyes softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability breaking through the iron exterior of the Vampire King. "Together," he echoed. And for a heartbeat, the storm outside, the curse, the darkness, they all seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, bound by a fate neither could deny. They moved through the castle swiftly, wards glowing along the walls as Kael struck down shadows that surged toward them. Serafina's spells illuminated the corridors, her voice steady as she cast incantations learned from the ancient tomes. She felt power she had never known, not from her lineage, not from training, but from courage, determination, and the bond that tied her to Kael. The curse, sensing their resistance, intensified. Shadows twisted and stretched, forming monstrous shapes that lunged from the walls, ceilings, and floor. Their shrieks echoed through the halls, shaking the very foundations of the citadel. But Kael and Serafina moved as one, instinctively anticipating each other's actions, their connection unspoken but unbreakable. At the heart of the castle, in the grand chamber where Kael had first tested her, the source of the curse awaited. A massive crystal, black and pulsating with dark energy, hung suspended in the air. Shadows swirled around it, forming the shapes of creatures long dead, twisted by magic into forms of wrath and sorrow. Kael stepped forward, sword drawn, his golden eyes blazing. "The crystal," he said. "Destroy it, Serafina. You must focus your energy." Serafina nodded, placing her hands on the relic she had carried all this time. She whispered the words of the ward, feeling the power flow through her, guided by the lessons Kael had taught her. The crystal pulsed violently, as if aware of their intent, and the shadows shrieked in protest. Kael joined her, holding her hand to guide the energy into the ward, his strength lending focus to hers. The connection between them was more than magic. It was trust, courage, and an unspoken recognition of what each had found in the other. Together they poured their will into the ward, sending streams of energy spiraling toward the crystal. The shadows erupted violently, striking at them. But Seraphina did not falter. She felt Kale's presence beside her, steady, unwavering, protective. She looked up into his golden eyes, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. Bound, fighting, surviving. "Now!" Kale shouted, and together they channeled their combined energy directly into the crystal. A blinding light erupted, flooding the chamber with pure white brilliance. The shadows screamed, twisting and dissolving, as the crystal shattered into 1,000 fragments. A wave of energy surged through the castle, shaking its foundations, then receded, leaving silence in its wake. Seraphina fell to her knees, exhausted, but alive. Kale was beside her instantly, his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You did it," he said, his voice both proud and tender. "You saved us." "We did it," she corrected softly, looking up at him. Her green eyes met his golden ones, and in that gaze was everything she had felt since arriving. Fear, defiance, admiration, and a spark of something deeper, something she could not yet name fully. Kale knelt beside her, his cloak pooling around them like shadows that refused to leave. "You were brave," he said, his voice low. "Stronger than I imagined. You changed everything tonight." Seraphina reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "And you," she whispered, "you trusted me." His eyes softened, and for the first time the mask of the Vampire King slipped entirely. "I had no choice," he admitted. "You earned it. You are extraordinary." A silence fell over them, full of unspoken words and shared understanding. The curse was broken, the danger ended, for now, but the night had changed them both. They were no longer master and captive, predator and prey. They were partners, bound not by obligation, but by choice and mutual respect. Kale's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Difficult," he murmured, echoing the words he had first spoken when she arrived. "You are not difficult anymore. You are essential." Seraphina's lips curved into a faint smile, her heart full. "And you," she replied softly, "you are more than I thought you could be." Outside, the sun began to pierce the clouds, casting light over the citadel for the first time in days. The rain glistened on the stone, and the air felt lighter, almost warm. The storm had passed, and with it, the darkness that had haunted them. Kale stood, lifting her to her feet. "We survived," he said, "but the night and the world
are not done with us yet. There will always be challenges, shadows that linger."
"You must remember that." "I know," Seraphina said, "steady and strong."
"But we will face them together." For the first time, Kale allowed himself to smile openly, a gesture rare and dangerous in its honesty. "Together," he agreed. "Always." They moved to the balcony overlooking the valley below. The world was quiet, serene, but the power that had threatened it was not entirely gone. It lingered, waiting for the next stir, but now they were ready. They had faced the darkness and survived. They had faced each other and found strength in that bond. Seraphina leaned against him, feeling the weight of the night lifting from her shoulders. Kale's arm circled her waist protectively, yet without restraint, without dominance. It was a gesture of partnership, respect, and newfound intimacy. "Kale," she whispered, I never expected any of this. Not the danger, not the darkness, not us." Kale's golden eyes met hers, unwavering.
"Neither did I," he admitted. "But perhaps that is what makes it real."
Perhaps the hardest battles are also the ones that change us the most. A soft wind blew through the balcony, carrying the scent of rain-soaked flowers from the castle gardens below. The castle itself seemed to breathe calm after the chaos, as if acknowledging their victory. Kyle's voice dropped, tender but commanding. Seraphina, the choice was never mine alone. You are free to stay or leave, but I hope you will choose to remain. Not as a captive, not as a pawn, but as my partner, my equal, my fated mate. Seraphina felt her heart skip, emotions surging through her like fire and water entwined. She had come here, unwilling, resistant, cautious, yet standing here, seeing the man behind the legend, she knew the truth she could not deny. I choose, she said softly, to stay with you, together. Kale's eyes glimmered, a mixture of relief, joy, and something deeper, something ancient, almost eternal. He took her hand, lifting it to his lips, and for the first time in centuries, the Vampire King allowed himself to be fully present, fully vulnerable. The sun broke fully over the horizon, casting golden light across the citadel. Shadows shrank back, powerless against the new day. And in that moment, Seraphina and Kael stood together, not as master and captive, not as predator and prey, but as equals bound by trust, courage, and choice. The citadel was safe, the curse defeated, and the bond between them sealed, not by force, but by love, respect. The night had been long, the battles fierce, but in the light of dawn, a new chapter began. Kael turned to her, his golden eyes warm and bright. Difficult? No. You are everything I could never hope to deserve, and now the night belongs to us both. Seraphina smiled, her heart full, knowing that whatever shadows came next, they would face them side by side. The Vampire King and the woman who had been called too difficult had found not just survival, but transformation, redemption, and a bond that neither darkness nor time could break. And as the first rays of sunlight glinted off the castle walls, Seraphina felt a truth deep within her. She had come to Nocturne Citadel a captive, but she would leave, if she ever left, not as a pawn, but as a queen of her own fate, and the fated mate of the Vampire King, who had once sneered at her defiance. The citadel was silent, the storm was over, and the world seemed to hold its breath, watching the birth of a new legend, a legend of courage, love, and the unbreakable bond of two souls entwined in fire, shadow, and destiny.